Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I guess I did not expect to vote against this package when I came in this morning, but I cannot for several reasons, foremost of which is I don't think it's acceptable to say, well, we've simply moved the ball down the field, because we've moved it barely inches. And I think we could have and should have done better. I think the people deserve better. Just very quickly, to remind my colleagues, which I think they already know, but people need to continue to hear this. We have seen foreclosures and bankruptcies in the state of Connecticut at higher rates than at any time in my lifetime. From June to December, there were 12,500 jobs lost in the state of Connecticut. From the middle of October to January, there were 4,000 more jobs lost in the state of Connecticut. That doesn't include the reductions at Pfizer. That doesn't include what is going to be future job losses on Wall Street, as much as 25% of which will be Connecticut residents, they predict. That doesn't include the fact that a corporation in Stamford is moving 350 jobs out of the state. And those people, I don't believe, have lost their jobs, but they won't be living in Connecticut having those jobs. Those foreclosures, those bankruptcies, personal and business, those 17,000 plus people who've lost their jobs have seen and are experiencing real pain. Real pain. And there are tens of thousands more across the state of Connecticut who are afraid that their job won't be there next week, who have seen their pension and retirement accounts dwindle. That is what we all know is happening. We see it and hear it every day. The one thing that I continue to hear from my constituents is that they don't see government making the same tough choices they're making. They don't see help coming from us. They don't see help coming from Washington, where they print money in the hundreds of billions with no accountability whatsoever. We can't print that money. We can't spend till the cows come home like they do in Washington. We have to balance our budget. We can't impose further burdens on the people of the state of Connecticut through higher taxes at this time. So if we're not going to make those tough decisions now, when are we going to make them? And I understand that the dual track that Senator Williams, I believe, has talked about, working on the budget deficit for '09 and at the same time working on the biennium budget. I understand that there is still time with respect to the biennium budget. And I think there is unanimous agreement that we want to work together to get a resolution to the biennium budget sooner rather than later. But we don't have the luxury of time with respect to the 2009 deficit for the current fiscal year. We simply do not have that luxury. As every day goes by, the decisions we make become harder, and the cuts and rescissions we have to make become more difficult. I was just at a community meeting this past weekend, and I used simple numbers because that's why I went to law school. I wasn't good at math. But if you have a program that costs $100 for the year and you want to cut 10%, you cut $10. But when you've already spent when you've already spent 50 of that 100, now you got to cut $20 to get to that 10%. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. I probably got my math wrong here again tonight. But we've already spent 6 months of our budget this year. And we may have as much as $1 billion left to go. We're going to spend roughly $7 to $8 billion between now and July 1, and $1 billion of it we're going to have to cut. If we don't cut it, then we have left ourselves with two choices. The money comes out of the rainy day fund, or we raise taxes. We owe it to all of the people in the state of Connecticut not to let those two decisions happen. We owe it to them to make those decisions to balance our 2009 deficit now. And if we wait till March or April, there's no way we're going to be able to do it. You can't cut $1 billion in the last quarter of the year. There's no way you can do it, especially when you're unwilling to look or can't look, as we can't, without concessions from the union. I didn't mean to say unwilling, but we can't unless they come to the table. So all we can do is look at programs. And you just can't do it. You just can't do that much in the last quarter. So if we fail to take action, we are admitting that we're going to allow a massive raid on the rainy day fund. We have about $1.4 billion there. We're looking at $1 billion deficit this year, perhaps. We're looking at $6 to $10 billion over the next 2 years. And most economists say we're going to have a third bad year after that. If we let that rainy day fund be used and raided now, our constituents are rightfully going to say, where the heck did all the money go? Where did it all go, and how did it go away so fast? So we can't let that happen. If we're going to raise taxes to balance the budget deficit, it's going to have to be retroactively imposed on people, which I would argue is not very fair. So how do we balance the 2009 budget deficit if we're not going to make real spending cuts right now? Right now. I will say that this is maybe one of the first times that we've had this type of debate where amendments we have offered, although defeated, I believe actually have been good for the process in terms of moving the ball forward, a defeated amendment. Because I did hear Senator Harp say that the 2-day furlough might be a good idea. I did hear Senator Daley say the idea of a reduction in our pay, I believe that's the amendment you were speaking on, Senator, is something that the leadership should talk about. And I wish we had actually been in discussions negotiating that. Yes, the chairs and ranking members, the chairs were good to reach out to talk to the ranking members, but candidly, they weren't negotiations. Candidly, there wasn't a lot of interest in accepting some of our ideas, and there wasn't an interest in accepting our ideas tonight. It's going to be bad news, folks. We all know that. You know, my last story. The first 3 or 4 months into my job as a lawyer at Cummings & Lockwood in Stamford, senior partner who was in charge of seeing how I was doing came to me and said, listen, I know all the other partners and all the work they've given to you. I want to see how you're doing. I said, well, you know, I'm kind of underwater. And he said, well, let me tell you what I've done since my 3rd or 4th year in practice, and it's worked. Every day I come into the office and I write down all of the things I have to do on a piece of paper. And I start with the thing that I least want to do, that's the hardest to do, that's the most difficult to do. That's the thing I do first. And the rest of the day falls in line pretty easy. And I've been doing it every day since. That's the advice that actually is going to have to happen right here. We're going to have to start with the most difficult decisions. We're going to have to do them first, and we're going to have to do them now. To date, I don't believe we've made those decisions. I don't believe we've demonstrated a willingness to make those decisions and an understanding of the full depth of the problem the people of the state of Connecticut face. So I stand in opposition to this as a marker to say that we cannot continue future deficit mitigation packages that don't make those big, tough, difficult decisions and move the ball way down the field rather than 1 yard at a time, because we don't have that luxury. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator McKinney. Senator Williams.